I've decided to close off the bottom of the structure. Since the building has been sectioned, I thought this would probably look better with this side up against the edge of the benchwork, where I can paint the entire side here black to match the fascia rather than having the bottom open. I think I like how this looks better with this bottom closed off, being how it's up against the back of the benchwork and even with the fascia. Now this building is closed off like this because it's been sectioned. There's not a complete building here. After adding this lower piece of styrene, there is a seam right here where the two pieces of styrene meet. But that's pretty much unavoidable, and I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm not going to try to fill it because I'd probably just make it worse. So I'm going to leave it like this. I think it'll be fine. I believe this structure is now ready for paint. It's not going to get its final coat, it's just going to get a base coat of paint, seal up the wood, and to see if I have any problems I need to fix. Getting ready to start putting some color on my building. Now you've noticed that I painted the inside and the outside with spray paint. Now the reason for that is since this wood is so thin, I try to get paint on both sides of the wood in order to try to keep it from warping. I found that if you just apply paint to one side to wood this thin, it has a tendency to warp. So if I can, I try to paint both sides. You can see on this piece, I have both sides painted. So I think now, when I start applying my color to the outside, I think I'm going to be okay since I already have paint on the inside. I know it doesn't look pretty, but I'm going to paint the main part of the structure red. And I'm going to use this red straight from the bottle. Well, I'm going to mix it with lacquer thinner, but I'm going to use it straight from the bottle without mixing colors because I'm almost certainly going to need to touch some things up along the way. So that way, if I use paint straight from the bottle without mixing in other colors, it's just easier to touch it up. Now you notice my paint is very thin. Going to be spraying with my Badger Patriot 105. And I have my compressor set for around 12 to 13 psi according to the gauge. All right, you'll notice how different the reds are. Now with this piece, I had sprayed it with white spray paint because I ran out of black spray paint. And you notice how much the underlying color matters to the top coat or the color coat. So I think I'm going to leave this like it is. But I think what I might do with this is paint this black and then repaint it red. So it comes closer to matching what I have on the main part of the building. What I did is I just put a little bit of black paint in the cup. So before I clean my airbrush, I'm going to go ahead and spray this. All right. So I'll let that dry and then I'll give it a coat of red later. Getting ready to spray the white on my building. I have some painter's tape where I've masked the building off. So this bottom part will be painted white. This front deck will be painted white, and this deck will be painted white. I'm going to be using Tamiya paint. I don't use Tamiya paint often. It's excellent paint, I just don't use it much. Alright, I'm going to mix my paint with a little bit of lacquer thinner. See, it's very thin, very thin. I'll be using my Badger Patriot 105. I have the compressor set to about 13 psi. I have a little extra there if I need it. All right. All right, things are looking pretty good. All right, I got my airbrush cleaned, and I'm ready to remove this tape. Now, this is painter's tape, but it sticks like crazy on this building. So I got to be careful peeling it off. All right, I might have a little bit of touch-up to do right here on this little deck. I need to put some white paint up against the building a little bit. But for the most part, I think taping that off did a pretty good job. I have the trim painted, and I think I'm going to leave the doors red. Could change my mind, but I think I'm going to. Kind of has that old barn look to it, which I guess would be appropriate for a place that sells feed and seed. Well, it's been a couple weeks since I've been out in the train room. Finally started feeling well enough to see if I could get a little bit of work done. So what I want to do now is get this structure ready for a clear coat. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this gray and this black and mix up a little darker gray. And then I'm going to take a piece of sponge and do some sponge chipping around areas on the building that would be peeled paint. I'm not going to do it too heavily, just a little bit to give it some character, but I don't want it to look too shabby. I'm going to want to take a little bit of black and mix it with some medium gray. So I have a small piece of sponge here, and it's pretty small. I want to be able to control my chips. All right, so I'll get my little piece of foam here. Probably call it a sponge, but it's actually just a piece of foam. And I want to put a wear pattern on my steps. I want enough paint in my piece of foam where when I apply it to the steps, I get some color, but I don't want so much paint in the foam where I'm actually painting the steps. All right, moving on to the structure. And I just want to give the paint a little bit of variation to give it some weather. So it's not just a bright white. Okay, for the areas I can't reach with the sponge, I have to use a brush. So I have to go in here, do a little bit of chipping with the brush so I get it up against the door. Trying not to be too heavy-handed here. And trying to get it to blend in with the sponge chipping.
All right. All right, now I'm going to add some light gray just to kind of dirty the steps up a little bit. Now, being that I'm working with wood here instead of plastic, some of the techniques that I typically use will change. Or I may end up using more pigments than I normally would. I'll just kind of see how it goes. I don't really have a firm plan. I'm just going to kind of take it as it comes.
Well, it's time to put a clear coat on the model. I'm going to use this MIG satin varnish. Now, I've recently purchased some VMS varnish, and I'm eager to try this, but I want to go ahead and use up this MIG varnish. So I'm going to go ahead and use this satin. Plus, I'm thinking maybe the satin, if I'm going to be using some pigments on the building, that the pigments won't stick so tightly to the surface with satin versus using a matte varnish. So that's another factor in deciding to use the MIG varnish. So like always, I'm using my Patriot 105. It's my all-purpose airbrush. And I have a regulator set to 13 psi. This varnish is extremely thin, so I'm going to put on some light coats. And after a coat, I'll let it flash dry. Second coat. As I mentioned in my end of year review at the end of last December, I'm at a point now where I'm going to be spending a lot of time working on my house. Now, you probably don't recognize this room. This is one of the main areas I was working on for my remodel. And I'm happy to say I have these two rooms done. Here's some of my armor models. And I have my modeling bench set up. Right here. But what I'm doing right now, I have to use this area. I'm working on some projects for the house. And I'm 3D printing this stuff on my Bamboo P1S printer. And I've designed these parts in Blender. And what I'm building is some dust filters for my HVAC vents. This is my modeling table, and I plan to put that to use working on structure projects. and maybe get into building some trees here in the future. But right now, I need to get these dust filters done for the rest of my house. It's my Waterbury clock. This clock was made in 1897. Still works pretty good. So my house remodel right now is my primary focus. The model railroading will have to take a little bit of a back seat. But I do plan to continue working on model projects. But I think, like it is with everyone, there's a time when the hobby has to take a little bit of a backseat. So these two rooms are finished. And looking at where it came from, I'm pretty happy with where I'm at right now. So I'll throw up a couple images of what this area looked like when I got started. I still have the rest of the house to remodel, and I'm going to be working on that for at least another month. I want to get the flooring done to a certain stopping point, and then after that, I need to get out in the garage for a few months to work on my classic cars. But I do plan to continue working on structures for the model railroad. So after being sick for over a month, I'm feeling better now. So I plan on building structures all summer. And I want to try my hand at building trees. So I'm going to need a lot of them. But I'm just at a point right now where the layout has to take a little bit of a backseat. But I want to thank you for watching. And I hope you come back and join me again.